Alrighty, y'all. Welcome back to the Generation Revival podcast, hosted by none other than myself and Bryce, of course.
And in this episode today, we're going to be going over our thoughts on the way God intended us to eat, diving into food as a whole. It's so complex and there's so much to talk about with this and the foods that we're supposed to eat and supposed to avoid. So it's a very complex topic, so we're excited to get into this.
And obviously, a huge part of our brands is speaking the message of faith and health. And obviously, that's what Generation Revival is. That's what the whole movement entails. And I know we always say, this is how you eat, how God intended. And I feel like a lot of people ask, like, how did God intend us to eat? And I think a lot of people have so many different mixed opinions on that. So today we're going to be clarifying that, or at least our opinions. This is all opinions, all opinions.
That's all it is.
But obviously after years of kind of eating this way or testing a ton of different diets and eating in so many different ways, obviously coming from eating horribly, which we can kind of dive into a little bit. There's a lot we've learned over the years and not only experience with ourselves and the growth we've experienced, but we want to be able to showcase you guys that. And obviously Bryce and I don't agree on necessarily everything, but we're here to discuss that here.
Absolutely. And if you guys have seen the previous podcast episodes, you know that both Paul and I, we grew up eating the standard American diet that was heavily ultra processed foods and just foods that did not nourish our bodies. Like, I know I definitely grew up with nutrient deficiencies just from eating a lot of fast foods, eating cereal, Pop-Tarts, chips, cookies, cakes, like all that basically all day, every day. And so that was most of my childhood, and I know it was the same for you, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, like we kind of discussed on our testimonies, but it's true. Like, it was a massive part of both of our stories, not only in our like physical being and just how we feel on a day-to-day basis, but also like spiritually in our relationship with God. Like, both of our stories, if you guys watch the episode, which I recommend you guys do if you guys haven't already. But through both of our testimonies, we both found Christ and also changed our diet kind of at similar times, or at least it definitely helped fuel that. And I think it's so important. It's something that is not talked about in the Christian space at all, and is why we really want to put an emphasis on it, and especially with Generation Revival.
100%. Like, food is foundational to our life. It's foundational to every aspect of it. It's like it affects our energy levels, our strength, muscle mass, like our sleep, our hormones, literally everything. And so in order to be the best we can physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you need to be eating high quality foods, or at least the best you can to nourish your body, like foods that are going to give you nutrients your body needs to thrive. And so, well, like, yeah, let's just get into that. Like, what are some foods that you think, like, when you think of foods that are nutritious and just help people thrive, like, what first comes to mind?
Yeah, and honestly, before we even dive into that, I want to also just say, like, why this is so important. Because I think people overlook diet obviously so much in our society, and it's honestly something that's corrupted our society so much. And I think one of the reasons why it helped me so much spiritually, and I know you too, is because, and the reason why I think we're so disconnected from God, honestly, is because of the holistic side of things, or the food we eat and how disconnected we are from nature and from the foods that we are meant to eat and from our food in general. Like, most people don't even know where their food comes from. And I think the more that obviously, because we were created, right? There was a creation, and God created things for specific reasons. He gave us things for certain reasons. And that's food, that's so many different things. And I think the more that we disconnect from what God actually intended with our food and with all these different things, the more that we're going to disconnect from God. And I think that's what we've witnessed in our society, is that disconnect, because the more that we've disconnected from our food and from like just industrialized and everything else, the more that we have disconnected from God as a society. And I think that's very intentional by the people who are running all this stuff, which I don't know if we'll tap into that today, but yeah, I just wanted to add that.
No, 100%. And I agree, dude. We are so disconnected from our food. Like you said, most people have no idea where it comes from. And there's so much value and benefit. What I've learned from shopping at farmers markets recently and getting foods locally is that you actually, like, it's a different experience when you're buying food that has a face with it, where you know where the food is coming from, who raised the animals, or who planted the crops. And like, when you see that face at a farmer's market, like, that just goes so far. But we are so disconnected. Like, I saw a like statistic or something that said that like over 70% of foods in grocery stores and over 70% of the average American's calories come from ultra processed foods, like foods that are literally made in machines that require like industrialization, like all these chemicals and additives. And like, if you just look at the ingredient list of some of these foods, it's just horrendous. Like, there are so many unnecessary ingredients that not only are unnecessary, but also detrimental and harmful to our health.
100%. And it's even worse if you look at what foods are in the grocery stores that are actually from your local area, from the place where you live, and where people actually have a connection to that food and know where it comes from, which is something that's new. Like, this is not something that was forever and always has been this way. Like most of the time, we always knew where it came from. If anything, we were a part of helping source it and grow it
Right.
or take care of the animals that you eventually would eat, whatever it may be. So there's lots of problems that stem from that I think we can't even acknowledge because both Bryce and I and all of our generation, that's all we grew up with. Like we didn't even understand that. Like food was just food, and it was like I didn't even know what food was.
Exactly.
It was like, all right, like yeah, this McDonald's meal, which I have no, it's chicken, I guess. You're like, which who knows what's actually in this crap? Like, there's so much with it that we are just so disconnected that like we had no idea. We had zero connection to the food. We didn't even know what it was. It was just what was in front of us. And this is all our generation has known ever. And I think being able to wake up to that, and once we changed it, I think both of us experienced that. Like once you change your diet, once you change the way you eat, it changes everything. Like you open your eyes completely and you're like, holy crap, like I can't believe I was eating that way and like how bad I felt on a daily basis without even knowing I was feeling that bad.
Dude,
It's
that's
like,
so true. When you're in that spot and it becomes normalized, like dysfunction becomes normal. People experience brain fog, acne, low
mm,
energy, all these symptoms, and we just grow accustomed to it and we think that it's normal. When in reality, a lot of it just stems from diet. Like
mm,
you literally changing your diet can change your life, and that I know firsthand that that's like that to be true. And
mm.
there's so much truth to that, and like I don't know. It's just crazy how it affects literally every part of our life. But we normalize dysfunction in our society, and so much of that could be prevented if we reconnected with our food, started shopping locally, and started eating single ingredient whole foods. I think that's one of the best things anyone can do.
Yep. Yep. And it affects you physically, spiritually, and mentally, like all of it. And it's all connected. And that's why all of these things are so important.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking it's important that we have this conversation and kind of discuss at least what we believe and what we've discovered is what God intended. And honestly, yeah, I think we should just like dive into at least like what would you say your perspective is in terms of how you think God intended us to eat or what kind of path you went on there.
Yeah. So when I think of the question, how did God intend us to eat? I look at nature. Like what did nature provide us? What did nature give us? And so if we didn't have industrialization, if we didn't have these machines and chemicals in the food, like what's going to be available? And so a lot of times that's going to be what first comes to mind. The foods that I primarily eat are single ingredient whole foods that come from the earth. I think that's like overall the best thing. And so that's a variety. I don't think carnivore or vegan or anything that's extreme in that way would be ancestrally appropriate or even what's best for us. But I think eating things like fruits come to mind, very abundant, found in nature. Meat, like meat from a cow, ruminant animals, especially like beef is, I think, amazing. A health food for humans. Raw milk as well.
Of
Raw milk,
course. We
eggs.
got the raw milk here.
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah.
Every single episode. This is gonna be tradition. Always got to be strapped on the raw milk. So
Shout out Hofner Farms
Hopper
too.
Farms, great farm, great farm. We might do a meetup there, one of our first meetups. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
no,
so,
it's so true. Like I think you bring up abundance, and that's kind of like how I base what God would have intended us to eat. Because when you evaluate, if we're evaluating, okay, God created everything around us. He created this earth. He created the food. So what I believe the creator of this world would have wanted us to eat, he would have gave us the most abundance of and easily accessible to. And I think that just makes logical sense, right? Like if you were the creator, if you were God and you wanted to have people eat a certain way, you would give them an abundance of it and you would make it easily accessible, whatever you wanted them to eat the most of, right? Or eat, whatever it is. And I think that's important to know. And like, at least that's the way that I kind of evaluate that. And obviously, that's going to depend on where you live locally. That's going to depend on what season it is.
yeah.
If it's winter, if it's summer, because different foods grow. And obviously, we'll dive into all that. But that's kind of at least how I base it off of. And obviously, evaluating nature, which is science, is the observation of nature. So observing nature, observing myself and just how I feel with certain foods, I think is an underlooked thing that's not talked about enough.
100%. Like listening to our bodies. That's
Yeah,
so important.
that's the number one thing.
And the more that you get in touch with, like the more you go back to our roots as in eating single ingredient foods and cutting out ultra processed foods, the easier it is to like for your body to send signals of what is good for you and what is bad for you. Like now, if we eat something that is very bad, like our bodies have a response to it because it knows that it's not good for us and probably something that we shouldn't be eating. And so and so yeah, we'll get cravings based on that too. That's another very cool thing is that like coconuts in Florida, for example, like we're dehydrated from being out in the sun on the beach, and like one of the best, most abundant sources of hydration and minerals is coconut water, and like there's just coconuts that are just on the trees right there. And so it's just like nature provides and gives us what we need. And I love what you said there about how it depends on not only the season but where in the world you are, because what's most abundant for someone may be not as abundant in other areas of the world, like depending on if
No.
you're near the coast or if you're in the mountains, like abundance is like
Like,
can vary.
unfortunately,
So
most people are not getting it. We're grateful that in Florida, I get a ton of coconuts there. But, like, yeah, most, like, you're not going to have, like, God clearly wouldn't have intended us to have coconuts in Pennsylvania when there's zero
mhm.
coconuts naturally growing in that area. And I think that is an important thing. Like, I think we've lost the idea that we are very connected to our environment. We're very connected to the places that we live in. Even if you look at honey, like honey's like a small example. Like we can't even measure through science or through anything else. You can't even measure how important and how much we're connected to the environment around us. And that's why grounding is so important. All these different things. Like we're so connected to the land and especially the land in which we live. And I think we've lost that. I think we forget that. And I think we weren't meant to be eating food that's grown across the country and then eat that here. And obviously when we say all these things, right, like there's steps, and I think we can discuss that here too. Like
Yeah.
there's going to be layers. So like yes, this sounds like scary, overwhelming, complicated, where really it's actually so simple when you evaluate it in this way that we're describing, of like just looking at what's available in your area. And that all becomes easier when you go local and do all those other things. But obviously we can touch into that later too.
Yeah.
But
And yeah, it is crazy. Like you go to supermarkets, even health food stores like Whole Foods, you find bananas that are from Mexico or something, avocados from Mexico or from like Cuba or just like all like from so many different countries. And it's just like that's so clearly like obviously there's still gonna be like avocado, bananas. I think those are great foods no matter where they come from. And like you said, there's steps to everything, but like in terms of what's ideal and optimal,
yeah.
local is and that's definitely gonna be best. And there's even if you do look at studies and stuff, you see that things like local raw honey has like certain health benefits in terms of allergies and a lot of that stems from the connection that we have like to those foods. And so it's super powerful.
No, 100%. 100%. And I think if we want to, because obviously when we're having these conversations, like a lot of people are going to get overwhelmed because they're like, oh, what? You're saying I can't have a banana now because it's from Costa Rica? We're like, food should not be stressed about
No,
at all.
no.
At all. Like there should be zero stress. It should be about being in a pursuit of just doing your best every single day. And that's something we try to preach and can get misinterpreted when we post certain kind of content just naturally because like a 30-second video.
Short form, yeah.
But we always preach like you should never be stressing about what you're eating, and it always should just be like I'm gonna do my best to try to align myself the most I possibly can with what God intended, and that's baby steps, right? Like that's going to be small steps. So I just want to make that clear. Like it's this what we're discussing here is like what do we think is like optimal
Yeah.
and what God truly intended us. And there were steps for us. We had a ton of steps to get to that point. We're not even fully there.
No,
Like
no,
not even
definitely
honestly
yeah.
not even that close to getting fully there to what I believe God truly intended, which is obviously are one of our biggest goals of Generation Bible is to help the world get to that point where it becomes easy for us to eat how God
It's
intended us
just
to, which
natural.
it should be and it used to be for most of history. So but yeah.
Yeah. And no, that's so true. And going back to the stress part of it, like I think that's so important to reiterate and I 100% agree. Like stress is honestly one of if not the worst things for our body and just for our health in general. And so food should not be stressful. It should come naturally like you said, and ideally that's the case. And that's something that I used to struggle with was having that stress with food and I felt like I couldn't eat certain foods and like getting that like anxiety, oh, if I eat this food like it's going to do this and like the thoughts that we think regarding food plays such an important role in how our body digests it and how the like how we utilize the nutrients from it and it's so powerful. So not stressing is going to be probably the healthiest thing you can do in almost every single case.
100%. And something that we've both learned is that the more that we've thought about health and the way that we view it in terms of like, okay, what's most abundant, what's most easily accessible, what's local in the local community, I don't even have to think about what I'm eating anymore because I literally just go to the local farm and it's like, okay, this was grown in the local area, so I'm going to eat it, right? Like I'm going to this, and obviously I look into it and I listen to my body and I'm in tune with my body. But
Yeah.
like it's become so simple. Okay, there's coconuts on a coconut tree here. Like obviously we're meant to have that, and I'm dehydrated. I'm on the beach, so I'm
Yeah.
going to go and climb the coconut tree, get the coconuts, drink the coconuts, and then okay, there's beef in the local area. Like there's milk in the local area, an abundance of it. So it's like obviously that's what we were designed to eat. I'm going to eat that, but it makes me I don't have to think. I'm just like okay, I'm going to go to the local farm. This is all local, and I'm going to eat what's grown locally. You know what I mean?
And so obviously we weren't designed to be eating ultra processed foods, things that don't even come from nature that are made in a lab. So what are some of those foods that come to mind and how do you think we should approach that in terms of what to look for?
No, 100%. I think, like you just said, like obvious. Like I think it all becomes obvious. Like we were saying, when you go to the local farm, it just becomes obvious, right? There's not in the local area. There's not a Kit Kat that just grows from the ground or like random things like that. Like it should become so obvious to you. Like clearly, God never intended us to eat these ultra processed foods that were literally made in a lab that didn't exist 200 years ago. That should be common sense, obvious. Seed oil is the same thing. If you just like everything, when the more that you realign yourself with nature, you start to evaluate nature logically using your instincts, the more obvious all of it becomes. Like, obviously, wasn't meant to eat that, wasn't meant to eat that, obviously was meant to eat this. Like, everything becomes very clear the more that you connect to it. And that's because we have a biology, right? Like, we have these instincts and intuition that God's given all of us in every single species. Where if you look at a cow, for example, they know not to eat certain foods and they know they're going to eat the grass, right? Like, they know what foods they shouldn't be eating and they know the foods. Like, you don't have to tell a cow what to eat. It knows what it should and shouldn't eat. Like, you don't have to tell a cow that that's a poisonous plant. They just know intuitively. They don't have a scientific study that's telling them that, right? And we have that within us too. And I think we've lost touch with that. And I think the more that you can align yourself, the more that you can avoid ultra processed foods, which is something that so clearly we were not designed to eat, the more that you can avoid those, the more that you can start to get in touch with that instincts, the instincts within you. Because what ultra processed foods do is it kind of detaches you from your instincts. You start to lose your instincts. You start to get addicted because these foods are literally designed to get you addicted. That's how they're literally designed. So naturally, that's going to mess with your ability to intuitively eat and intuitively know, like, okay, this is something I should eat, shouldn't eat, because your taste buds, all of it's going to be so messed up. So I think that's so important.
That's a very important point. And it's like, it's crazy when I think back to my own food journey. And I know it was the same for you. Like, there was a point where we didn't even find certain whole foods like tasty, like fruits and honey. Like, it wasn't enough because of the addiction that we had to ultra processed foods. And like you said, these foods are unnaturally addicting. Like, they raise your dopamine when you eat an ultra processed food. Your dopamine rises to an unnaturally high level to where not even fruit and honey and stuff like that, which is sweet, this like sweets that God gave us in a sense, like not even those kind of foods can reach that same level of dopamine, to where that's where people find it hard because it's like they're literally addicting. Like, ultra processed foods are addicting, and like, so most of the
drug.
world,
It literally is a drug, and it's designed to make these corporations money. So it's designed to be addictive,
and it also, and it's so easy to overeat because these are devoid of most essential nutrients that we need for our health. So it's easy to overeat these foods. It spikes our dopamine very high, spikes our blood sugar, so you get that energy surge right away, and then you end up crashing later on. But so it's just like, so but once you avoid those foods altogether, like you said, you end up being able to get back into your instincts with food, and you end up getting that natural, to where now for us, like, fruit and honey is like dessert. Like, that's literally candy and like so tasty. And now like you start to crave those foods though, and that's how you know you're in a good spot, when you start to crave single ingredient foods like that, like foods that come from the earth, instead of craving crumble cookie, Starbucks, or Papa John's. Like,
yeah, it's actually crazy thinking back, because now, like, we actually are disgusted about those foods. Like, not in a way of like, we genuinely don't crave them at all. Like, we'll be around it and it's like my body almost is rejecting that food because it's like, this is, I know it's trash and my body knows it's trash, and my instincts are finally in tune, and my body's actually working the way it's designed to. And I think that's so important. Like you said, literally honey and fruit tasted bad to me. Like, that is insane. Like my taste buds were so jacked up from eating ultra processed foods my whole life that literally honey, which is like, now when I have that, like you said, literally like cocaine. Like, it's so good. Like, it's so tasty. It's so incredible. And it's crazy like how much. So that's why we always preach, like, not in moderation. Dude, like, you can't eat, like, the 80-20 rule is a complete scam.
It's a scam.
Because of the fact of, first of all, you can't really draw the line on what's moderation and what's not. It's so easy to go past that line. Like, I always found with everything in my life, like, and I've noticed for so many people, I know for you, like, when I say I'm not doing this thing, I might fall into temptation, right? I might. But if I'm in the pursuit of avoiding it, then it ends up being more moderation, because it's like, okay, I fell a few times this year, right? Because naturally we're flawed. We're not going to be perfect, but it's not about stressing. Or, like I said, don't even stress about it, but just be in the pursuit of trying to eat the foods that God intended us to eat every day, and set up your life in a way where it's easy to do that, which it does, as we described, going to the local farms, doing all things of that nature. But it becomes so easy. And I think when you are doing moderation, it's very dangerous when these foods are literally designed for you to overconsume. And it also, like we're describing, it takes you away from your instincts. It actually makes it harder, the transition really hard. Like, we both kind of went all or nothing with it. Like, we went from like eating horribly to eating completely good. And we did that cold turkey, didn't cheat for a while. And in the beginning it sucked, right? Like, in the beginning it tasted horrible. Like, beef tasted bad to me, eggs tasted bad to me, honey, fruit, like, obviously. And then eventually now it's like all I crave. Like we've literally eaten a pound of beef every single
every
day.
day for years. Like
Never
that's
gets old.
yeah,
Never
it
gets old.
doesn't get old. And that's a great point. The thing with moderation, like moderation, 80-20 rule, cheat days, cheat meals, like I used to do that. I used to practice that and follow that, but I genuinely think that those are scams now. Like I don't
Completely.
believe in those because like you said, with foods in moderation, like not everything should be eaten in moderation. Just like how alcohol is something that I think the goal should be as close to zero as possible with alcohol. Like I don't think you should strive to drink multiple times a week or even just like once a week. Like I think you should strive to get as close to zero as possible, ideally. And again, accepting, okay, we're probably not going to be perfect. We may fall, and that's okay. And it's not stressing about that. But so, like certain things just shouldn't be eaten in moderation.
Yeah.
And ultra processed foods are one of those things. And it's almost easier. It's almost like more freeing for you and I because now we know that we're not going to eat this at all.
It removes the temptation.
Whereas like the
There's no,
person who's doing moderation, they're constantly in temptation. Like how much is too much? Can I can only have one Oreo today or two Oreos or like,
mm,
and then they're like in a constant battle where for us, it's out of sight, out of mind. We don't even think about it. Like it saves us mental
never.
energy and just like makes it so much easier on our lives.
So much easier. So much easier. So now that we made it clear that ultra processed foods is just obviously like it's just obvious that God never intended us to eat that. Now where it gets more complicated is evaluating it in the way of like, okay, like what foods should we eat the most of? Should we cook the food? Should we not cook the food? Like there's a lot to dive into there. And yeah, like I think we have some good conversation we could have on that,
Yeah.
maybe some disagreements there, but like it all comes down to the way I evaluate it is I think it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be different depending on where you live and on the person. Honestly, it's going to be different on the person too, and the season of life that you're in, the season that you're in, whether it's winter or summer, because obviously fruit isn't often growing in most areas in the winter.
Yep.
So you're not gonna have as much fruit, and I truly, but like that's what I did. I've been doing like seasonal eating for a while. So yeah, we can kind of dive into that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on like the abundance aspect, like if you even view it in that way fully, or like, and also just yeah, like what do you think is most abundant? Because I actually we haven't really had this conversation that much, honestly. We've had a few conversations about it, but
Yeah. I think the goal and like and when I say this again, like yeah, this is what's ideal. This isn't like and there's steps and levels to everything. So not everyone is at this point where they can just look at it and be like this. Like sometimes I think a better step for most people is just going to grocery store, shopping perimeter, single ingredient foods. But then like a step above that is like what we're talking about now, and that's like seasonal eating, locally eating. And a lot of times when you eat seasonally and locally and you go to farmers markets, you're only going to find the foods that are available there and more abundant during that time. So it's naturally going to be easier. Like you're going to find less fruit at the farmers market when it's winter. Like we saw that at the Southwest Ranchers in Florida. Like we saw that when we went a few weeks ago, there wasn't as much fruit as when we went in like September or something like
Yep.
that, like a few months prior. And so I think naturally when you're eating locally and shopping locally, you're going to be more in touch with the seasons. And I think that's absolutely true. Like I think there's certain foods like sweet potatoes and root vegetables and stuff like that that I do think can play a small role in the diet. Like I think that's going to be a better time to be eaten in like the winter months, like squash and sweet potatoes and stuff. I think that's better to be eaten in the winter, and like fruits and abundance of things like watermelons and berries and stuff. I think that's a better food for the summer months. So I think seasonal eating is great, and I think
it's definitely what God intended.
definitely
Seasonal
what
eating.
God intended. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think where it gets tricky is like, okay, like how much beef should we be eating? How much milk should we be having? Should we have it raw? Which you guys know the answer to that. We always raw milk always. And that becomes obvious too the more that you evaluate it in the way that we're describing of like what did God intend? Literally the milk that God was describing in the Bible was not pasteurized. Pasteurization wasn't even introduced until 150 years ago, whatever else it was. And if you look back at the history of all of this, of what happened, which honestly, we would have to do a whole other podcast on that.
Definitely.
But like things just become really obvious, you know. I mean, it becomes really obvious, but it does get a little complicated in terms of like I think that's where we might have some disagreements of like, okay, how much vegetables should be like? What's more abundant, vegetables, fruits, honey? How abundant is honey? How
Yeah.
abundant is milk? How abundant is meat? And yeah, so I don't know what your takes are on.
Yeah. And I think it's cool, and this is something that you and I have talked about, but most people don't know this, but a lot of dairy cows, like Holstein cows and cows like that, they produce between 7 to 10 gallons of milk a day, which is just crazy. Like that is clearly such an abundant food. And I know you've told me about that. And that's just like, I think that's so clearly a food that we were designed to eat because of how abundant it is. And things like eggs are going to be pretty abundant too, depending on how many chickens you have and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's definitely an important aspect, is how abundant that food would be in nature. Like fruits are going to be more abundant than vegetables and just like in God's original design. And so yeah, I think that's kind of my take on that in terms of like eating foods in abundance. I think it's important. I don't think it necessarily is like the end all
It's
be
not
all, but
everything. Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly the same thing I view when it comes to red meat. Like, right? You said raw milk, super abundant, 6 to 10 gallons
it's crazy.
every single day
So
from
much.
one cow, which is actually absurd. When I heard that stat, I was like, that's incredible. And it makes sense because when you look at raw milk, it has almost every single nutrient that your body needs. It's so hydrating, has electrolytes, has protein, carbs, fats. Like, you can literally live off raw milk. And there are tribes that did live off of raw milk and still to this day live off raw milk. So raw milk, so incredible, so abundant. And same thing with red meat, right? Red meat has, if you kill one cow or slaughter one cow, you have hundreds of pounds of meat. So obviously, red meat was designed to be a very abundant source of food, of something that we were meant to eat a
Yeah.
lot of. Same thing with fruits. If you look at fruits, there's so much fruit. Like when you see fruits in fields and valleys, whatever else it is, like you're eating that fruit, that seed's falling and it's creating another fruit tree, which
Right.
is producing more fruit. And it's meant to just create life, to create so much more food and just such an abundance. You know what I mean? And when I view vegetables, which may be a more controversial one, it's not as abundant and it doesn't really necessarily create life. It often actually creates death.
Right.
Like it doesn't, when you have a vegetable, it's not, when you go to the bathroom or when you spit it out, there's no seed to it. It doesn't grow again. It actually just kills. When you pull a vegetable out, it kills the vegetable. It kills the seed. It kills everything.
Yeah.
So I don't view it as like, I'm not saying we shouldn't eat them at all. I do think they were meant more as like a medicine more than
Yeah.
food. And I don't think they're as abundant. Obviously, with modern farming, it's become a lot more abundant. But when you looked at like what God originally gave us, fruit was far more abundant than vegetables. So that's just my take. I'm not anti-vegetables. I'll have them
Yeah.
from time to time if my body's craving them. I've just noticed my body never really craves them, honestly. Like I've never, like I don't. I'll have them sometimes. I'll have sweet potatoes or like different things in that nature, or onions, like
Mm.
some like what is it? What was the like the peppers? Yeah, like peppers and
Peppers
like,
are a fruit technically.
okay, not the
But yeah.
peppers. What was it? It was like the, maybe I'm tripping, but all right, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But like we were like, I will have them from time to
Yeah.
time, but only when my body, like I just listen to my body in that way. And when I do evaluate nature in that way, like it genuinely, to me, seems more of like a medicine.
Yeah.
And obviously, like fruits want you to eat them because when you eat them, they're going to produce seeds and then it's going to produce more fruit. Where vegetables don't necessarily want you to eat them, they actually have defenses to prevent you from eating them. That's just my take.
Dude,
So,
yeah.
and I've noticed that in my life. Like I've noticed that I felt better when I limited them. I wasn't
Right.
necessarily like getting rid of them entirely. Some people thrive off them different during seasons. Obviously, it depends where you live, of course, but yeah.
Dude, and this is crazy. Like one of the things that would surprise so many people when we talk about the foods we eat in health, like a lot of times what's conventional and what most people think of as healthy foods is like salads, vegetables and stuff. But people are surprised when you and I say that we don't really eat many vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't eat vegetables that often or that frequently.
No.
Like it's not, and I don't think that it should be the central part of any diet. Like animal foods are much more nutritious in general than plant foods. They, in terms of providing us for like enough calories and energy. Like a lot of times, like things like beef is very calorically dense, so it's going to fill us up, give us energy. And not only that, it has so much bioavailable protein and fats that a lot of times are lacking in vegetables and even fruits for that matter. And I love what you brought up about the life part of it. And fruit is so clearly something that is meant to be eaten. Like when you look at fruit on a tree, like it's literally the colorful part of it, like so clearly the part that the plant wants us to eat. And this is actually like if you look into botany and like the like history of plants in general, like nuts, seeds, stems, roots, leaves, like these are some of the most highly defended parts of plants because the goal of every species is to survive and reproduce. And so with vegetables, a lot of times like they're going to have more defense chemicals because humans and stuff like this, like we have our arms and our like ability to defend ourselves physically, but plants don't have that physical ability like animals do, like us. And so in turn they have defense chemicals that prevent certain animals from eating it so that they can survive and reproduce. And so a lot of times that's things like oxalates, which vegetables are higher in, and just like anti-nutrients that can be detrimental to us. And so I think it's just crazy. And I think an important point to note is that like a lot of people think health is like just all veggies, eat your greens and stuff, but it's funny, like we really don't eat greens at all, like
Yeah, like not at all.
on a daily basis. And I like what you said though. I think it can be a great medicine. Like I think making bone broth with vegetables that's like
And like
slow
cooked when you're
cooked and
cooked.
yeah, always cook vegetables if you're eating them, but yeah.
No, 100%. I agree, and it is a controversial one in our society and world today, obviously. But I think it's something that isn't talked about enough. And honestly, this is another thing. Speaking of like life, right? Like things that bring life. I think that's another thing when it comes to like how did God intend us to eat? Like things that bring life. Like that's so beautiful and so powerful. And in nature, things that like when you eat it, it brings new life. And I think that's so cool when it comes to fruit. And this is like a new diet. It's like obviously I don't consider any of these things diets because it's just eating like foods from the earth. But I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on this because we've actually never talked about this. But like I was talking to my brother about this, Sean,
Mm.
and like the life diet, like, and it
Mm.
basically what the life diet is like only eating foods that don't involve killing.
Mm.
So when you think about that, it's like unsterilized or unfertilized eggs. It's raw milk because you're not killing any animal when you're having raw milk. It's
Right.
Fruits because it's life giving. I think it's literally fruit, honey,
Milk
eggs,
and
and
eggs,
yeah, milk.
I think that's it.
And I think like honestly, when I evaluate that, like there is something to that. Like there is something to that. I'm not going to disregard that, and it's something I potentially might experiment with. You never know, because that also has to do with like what is most easily accessible. So when I evaluate it, right, like I said, what God would have intended us to eat, He would have given us the most abundance of and easily accessible to. And when something involves killing, that's obviously going to make it less accessible, right? Like it's not as easy to get that. It takes a little effort to kill a cow, to slaughter it, to skin it, to like get all the meat, like do all that good stuff. Same thing with killing any animal, right? Like that's a process. Where milk, you milk the cow, pretty simple, pretty able to do that. Fruit, pick it off of the tree.
Yeah.
Honey, that's a little complicated unless you get your own hives, like whatever else it is, but it brings life. And I think it's very interesting. It's just a thought. I'm not doing it right now. I still eat meat and all that stuff, and I think it's great. I'm not saying the other things are bad. I'm just saying that's like an interesting thing. I think
No, that's very interesting that you're bringing that up, and I think there's something to that. I think there's something powerful, and funny enough, those are four of the foods that you and I both kind of eat more so than a lot of other foods, as in eggs, fruit, raw milk, and raw honey. Like those are four of the foods that we do include a lot of in our diet. And this is something that's like a truth that, or that's a perspective that I do find very fascinating. I think there's something to that, and I'd love to do more research and look into that more. I've always like
experiment with it.
Yeah, I've always had the mindset of the truth that, or at least in my mind, the truth that in order for us to live, something else has to die. And so that's kind of like something that at least I've always thought to be true, and maybe that like that may or may not be actually true, but like
yeah.
But
it is interesting because when you look at that diet, though, like you would be able to live and honestly kind of thrive
for sure
eating that way. So it is interesting in that way. I think it is interesting, but yeah, honestly, like that is how we believe God intended us to eat in a lot of ways of like meats, prioritizing obviously like whole foods, and we'll honestly do another podcast on probably like the steps of like how to get there, like the steps of like what the steps are. So like don't get overwhelmed by this. Like do the best you can with what you have. What you can afford, and obviously our society is structured in a way where it makes it very difficult. But another reason, like what God would have intended us to eat, He would have intended us to grow our own food. So whatever we would have been able to grow, whatever animals we would have been able to raise, like so that's why we want to build these towns and do all that stuff. Y'all know how much we've talked about that, but like when we do that, everything becomes so easy. Like God never intended eating healthy and being healthy to be complicated.
It should be
the
norm.
Yeah, like that would be your job. Your job would be tending to your land, tending to the animals on the land, eating and living in that way, trying to thrive and be successful with your community. Like we wouldn't be in nature trying to survive and being like, oh no, we can't do this, or like, you know what I mean? Like it's just everything would have been clear, or like we wouldn't need all the science and all these different things to tell us what to eat and what not to eat when you're living in that way. And everything becomes more clear the more that you reconnect to that. And that's why I said like we're not fully there, right? We'll be fully there when we're fully growing our own food and living off our own land, which is obviously the long-term goal. But
so now that we have a base understanding, and that the people listening and watching this do have an understanding of the foods that we believe God intended us to eat, and the foods that are most abundant in nature and can be locally grown and found seasonally, in terms of cooking, that's a very controversial topic. There's people who are advocate for all raw foods. That includes animal foods, plant foods. Like what's your take on raw foods?
It's so interesting, and it's been something that I've been like everything that I do, I intuitively look into. I don't believe in, and this is a whole nother conversation. I don't believe in always having to have like a certain scientific study and different things of this nature, because I think our bodies tell us what it wants and it will reject what it doesn't want. And I think when it comes to raw foods, it's something that I did experiment with and still want to tap into. And honestly, in my mind, I genuinely think it would be optimal in terms of like when you eat anything, right? When you're eating or when you cook anything, when you heat anything up, you're going to kill nutrients. You're going to denature that meat or whatever else it is, especially like raw meats have a lot of water
Yeah.
that's retained in it. So obviously when you heat that up, that water is going to be killed and a
Yeah.
lot of nutrients alongside of that. So I think it's interesting. And I think it's also interesting that we were eating raw meat for a very, very long time. And raw meat was pretty standard like in our diets. And if you look at all animals, like they're not cooking their meat. And obviously we're not like other animals in that way. And the way that I view it at least is like, I don't think cooking meat is bad for you, right? Like I don't think that's bad for you, but I do think raw is going to be better for you. And I don't think that everyone should just jump into eating raw meat because it's going to have more bacteria, more different things that your body has to be able to learn how to digest and build up to that. I think we're at the point where we could do that because we've already had a lot of raw foods and like we'd be able to adjust into that. But someone who's only eating ultra processed foods, like I don't think you should just jump straight into just eating raw foods. I think that might be a rough adjustment. I don't think your immune system or your body will be able to handle that bacteria. But I think when your body can handle the bacteria, which our bodies are meant to adapt to be able to handle that
Right.
bacteria, I think it's actually going to fuel your immune system. It's going to make you healthier, stronger, and I do think it would be optimal in that way. And honestly, I'm trying to work towards that. I want to start incorporating it a lot more.
So exclusively raw, you think is like what would technically or theoretically be most optimal, as in raw meats, raw eggs, raw milk, raw honey,
Yes,
etc.
100%. I 100% believe that. I think because think about it, the way I view like at least when I view my concept of like health and what God intended, like most abundance of and easily accessible to,
Mm.
right? Like cooking is a process, and I do think the more processing you have, the less healthy it'll be. Not saying it's not healthy. Like I said, it's healthy. It's still great
You're
for
not
you.
saying cooked
Yes,
ground
it's not
beef is bad for
unhealthy.
you.
It's not
Yeah.
unhealthy. But I would say it would be optimal to eat raw, honestly. And I think that obviously because we view that with raw milk, we viewed that for raw liver, we viewed that for butter and all. And then it's like, why are we not applying the same logic
Right.
towards other things? And I do get and understand like obviously raw milk is going to be more sensitive to heat because it's just like it's obviously just doesn't have as much density as meats do and everything else. But like I have been eating raw eggs, raw milk, raw butter, raw cheeses. Even I've had raw meats like and I feel great. I feel amazing doing it. And I do think like when you look at nature, when you evaluate nature, it's definitely something we were designed to do.
Mm. Do you think there are any benefits to cooking meat?
Like like that's what I honestly I don't. Like I think the only benefit there would be to cooking meat is if the meat was like really damaged or like had a lot of bacteria that you wouldn't be able to digest, whether it had been fermenting for a very long time and your body isn't ready for that. I do actually think fermentation is actually another thing we can talk about, which I think is also like a very powerful thing and I think can actually be better for you if your body can handle that fermentation, which is something that I think you have to build up to because we've been so disconnected from it. But I think cooking it could help protect you from that and adjust that from that. But I honestly I don't see how there can be any benefit to cooking your meat. And obviously, someone out there is going to be like, oh, this scientific study said this. It's like, I don't view health in that way. I view it very intuitively and evaluate. I use science. I evaluate, which is observing nature. I observe nature. I observe myself and how I feel with certain things and how I just intuitively believe God would have intended it. And I've noticed that in my life. So that's what I'd say. I don't know if you disagree with that, but
Yeah, yeah. I that's something. Yeah, I've done a lot of thinking on that because, like you said, I'm in the same boat in the sense of raw eggs, raw honey, raw butter, raw cheese, like even raw liver. I would just eat it raw because it was so much more convenient. But I never applied the same logic to beef, like ground beef, what I was eating every day. So it's
it's
like,
like, why?
so yeah. So I'm just trying to connect that, and obviously, I don't know. There's at least people say there's more risk with certain foods than others and stuff, but and from what I've seen, like cooking the food and pasteurizing it, whether that's cooking beef or heating up milk, it yeah, I mean it's true. It denatures the proteins of it, like it gets rid of bacteria in it, which is like potentially good and bad, like depending on
Yep.
what it is. And bacteria alone is a whole nother like topic and rabbit hole, because most people, when they think about bacteria in food, it's like a very scary subject. It's like, and like most times when you think of bacteria, people have a negative connotation with it, like automatically. It's just like E. coli, salmonella, and like things that people at least think are like very damaging and very like harmful and scary. And so I think that's the main reason that people avoid raw foods. But
And that's what draws me to it, honestly. Like the fact, if you look at our society, fear, where people are pushing fear is what you honestly should be doing. If you looked at the vaccines, everyone's pushing the vaccines. They're like, fear, fear, fear. Like, if you don't get the vaccine, you're going to kill someone else or you're going to die. Like, fear. And that's the tactics that the elites use on us. And I think it's interesting that they put so much fear on raw milk, which has completely changed my life. They put so much fear on raw foods, especially. Like, they label people as crazy for doing these things. And it's like, I think what's more dangerous is eating foods that were made in a lab that don't expire. I think that is far more dangerous than eating a food that's naturally occurring in nature that we've eaten for thousands of years and still is included in our culture. You can literally buy raw steak tartare at restaurants, which is probably not even the highest quality beef.
definitely not.
So like, it makes you think, like, that's what drew me to it originally, was how much fear they put on it. It just made me know, okay, clearly there's something here. You know, I mean, it's clearly something that is good for you because it's in nature. Like, it's naturally occurring in nature. And we've been eating it. It's part of our biology as well. Because obviously not everything that's a part of nature is something that's going to be good for us, right? There's some
Definitely.
poisonous plants.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that's based on our biology. So like naturally occurring and also what we're biologically drawn to. We're biologically drawn to meats.
You're never
right?
going to
eat beef.
crave a poisonous plant.
Yeah, like you shouldn't. If you're craving a poisonous plant, your something's messed up in your system. Just like when you eat ultra processed foods, it messes up your system. So like I think you should fear the potato chip or the Kit Kat that doesn't expire, like all these different foods that don't expire. I'm saying a lot about Kit Kats right now, but like we should be fearing those foods more than the raw meats. Honestly, I believe, and obviously it'll take an adjustment, just like raw milk sometimes takes an adjustment for people. But like even like you were describing, like obviously like the heat sensitivity and the bioavailability, the protein, like all these things, which I agree. But like you can even feel that in the taste. You have raw milk that's pasteurized, or you have milk that's pasteurized, and you can it tastes dead. It literally tastes like water. It doesn't even taste like anything. Where you have raw milk from like a good source, it's like thick, creamy,
So nourishing.
so nourishing. Like you feel it fueling your body. When I would have pasteurized dairy, I remember like a year ago I had it because there was no raw milk, and I was like, all right, let me just try the pasteurized dairy, and I couldn't tolerate it my entire childhood. Like my stomach would always, I would have it, but like my stomach would always hurt. I'd be in the bathroom, like whatever. And I remember I had it again instantly. I had like 3 sips and stomach instantly is hurting. It tasted like so dead and just like horrible. And so I don't know. It's very interesting. All right, y'all. Sorry to interrupt you guys in the podcast, but we are here to tell you guys about Upspace. Because if you guys don't have Upspace by now, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
Upspace is an app that's literally designed to level up your health. I think it's an app that everyone should be on. It's just full of content that's actually good for your health and designed to help you level up. There's workouts, recipes, and educational content from hundreds of health creators, including myself and Paul. And so if you're not on Upspace, definitely check it out.
When you look at most cookbooks that creators sell, they often sell a cookbook for like $50+. And in Upspace, the whole design of the Upspace app is to make being healthy affordable to everyone. So not only can you get bite-sized cookbooks, workouts, and daily educational content, just educating you guys on how you can eat and live how God designed us, but you also can get hundreds more cookbooks, workout programs, and just so many activities, so much value in this app, all for $36 for the entire year. And that's literally what the design of this app is to make it affordable for everyone. And right now this is a limited time deal that they're doing this. So if you want to tap in and fight against these corporations, which is the whole goal of this, and to level up your health in any aspect, download the Upspace app today.
Dude, it is so interesting. And it's crazy. You know, we have disconnected from our food when people fear raw milk, as in milk from a healthy cow, more so than preservatives and foods that don't expire, food dyes, high fructose corn syrup, like
Alcohol.
That's great. People fear raw milk more than alcohol. This is crazy. I made multiple
It's easier to
posts about
buy.
this. Dude, people genuinely are more afraid of and think that raw milk is more dangerous. Like they'll fear that, but then they'll get drunk or drink alcohol. And it's just like so backwards. It's so like it's honestly crazy. Like It's insane.
And you need to understand the same people that are getting caught like eating children, doing all this demonic stuff, those same people are the ones telling you to drink pasteurized milk, to eat ultra processed foods, and to avoid raw meats, to avoid raw milk, to avoid all these things. And I think there's something there. I think the system was clearly designed to fail us, and it has been failing us. So I don't even think it's a crazy idea to say like obviously they don't have your best interest in heart. That's already true. Everyone can already evaluate that. But I do think it should brighten your idea to like things that they're telling you not to do, you should at least start questioning and looking into, right? And understanding like, hey, maybe they're not right. And let me try this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think so much of it is profit driven and stuff. And like, and when you think about milk, for example, I think like most of the milk that you buy from a grocery store that's been ultra pasteurized and stuff, it probably honestly would not be safe to drink the milk from those cows raw because of the way those cows are treated. And when you pasteurize milk like that and when you heat it up and do all these things to it, it almost like allows you to neglect the animal's health. You can fatten it up, you can feed it crappy stuff because you're just going to nuke it with pasteurization anyway, to where so it almost takes away from you actually caring for the animal, putting in more work, but it drives more profit because you can put milk that's ultra pasteurized on the shelf for multiple weeks at a time without it going bad, whereas like raw milk theoretically
actually
doesn't go bad,
but it tastes
technically,
different.
but
It ferments.
and it changes. Yeah, it changes the structure of it. So in terms of profit, but that's the thing. If you drink expired ultra pasteurized milk,
You'll literally die.
that's gonna get you sick.
Oh,
like
yeah, you're so sick.
that's what's gonna get you sick. Whereas raw milk, like you said, like technically it never expires. It just ferments and it changes the structure and stuff. But that's not necessarily gonna get you sick.
Which I've had. I literally just was in the bus, the fermented milk, and it's fire. Like it tastes like definitely sweet. It tastes like more of a cheese or whatever else it is.
Yeah,
But
and I think it's important to say that sourcing definitely matters. Like you want to get high quality milk. Like if you're drinking unpasteurized milk, you want to ideally get it from a local farmer who you know and trust, and you know the practices, you know what they're feeding the cows, how they're raised, and just everything of that nature. And that goes for everything, especially beef, for example. Like don't just go to Walmart and just start eating.
Especially when you're having it raw, yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But that's actually another thing that we can dive into, and is a whole nother rabbit hole of like that's an underrated aspect of all of this. Is
cutting corners.
obviously God didn't intend us to lock cows in chambers and like inject hormones into them and do all this stuff. Like clearly God didn't intend us to treat his creation, his animals, in that way. And obvious, so like that alone is enough. Like the ultra processed food industry is so corrupt and so unethical. So like by eating those foods, you are in a way indirectly supporting like those industries who treat these animals in these unethical ways.
Yep.
And that should be very telling. That you literally can't have raw milk if the animal is treated the way that they treat standard animals, where they usually do pasteurization and everything else to be able to kill it, like to kill off the bacteria, because like that should be very telling that clearly these foods are not good for us, and that this is what God intended us to do. That in order to have the raw milk, you have to actually raise the animal in a way that it was actually designed to be raised, including the food. The difference in the quality of the food is unreal. Like the health of the cow, you're eating that. So the nutrients that's in the beef is going to be better if the cow is raised better and healthier.
Naturally.
That's just obvious.
Yep.
Right? So if you're injecting hormones into a cow and trapping it inside all day in a cage, obviously it's going to be less healthy. The food itself is going to be less healthy because the cow is going to be less healthy because it's not living in the way it was designed to. So like, this is what I mean. And what we were describing is like, everything becomes so obvious when you just look at nature and look how they're doing it. And it just becomes so clear. Like, obviously he designed us to eat 100% grass-fed organic beef because the cows are actually living how they're meant to, which means it's going to be healthier. Like all this stuff, there's a million things you can talk about with all this, but it becomes so clear the more that you evaluate that.
Dude,
look at that.
It becomes so clear. And I love that point you brought up there for a second, where it's like you are indirectly supporting these companies who are cutting corners, who are treating animals poorly. Like Crumble Cookie, just as an example, the eggs they use, like it turns out like someone did a deep dive and found out that the eggs they use are like, they're not cage free. They're like treated very like just awfully. And like, so when you were buying ultra processed foods and shopping at fast food restaurants and stuff, you are supporting cutting corners. You are supporting profits. You are supporting all these other things over your health. And when you disconnect from that and you stop supporting that stuff, we vote with our dollar every single day. Mm-hmm. And so when we spend that money instead at local farmers markets from farmers that are in our local community, like we are building that ecosystem and we are encouraging better practices, healthier animals, and in turn, more nutritious food that nourishes our bodies. It's a win-win. Not only does it taste better, but like you said, it's more nutrient dense, and that's on every level. Like that's in terms of protein, the omega-3 to 6 ratio, like the amount of vitamins in it, like on every single level, it's healthier for the animals, for the soil, for us, for everything. So,
And that's how we can bring health back to our world. Like God intended this to be easy, right? But the world that we live in today is
so
designed in such a
complex.
way where it becomes very difficult to actually eat how God designed us to, right? To eat how God intended us to. And it's such a flawed thing. But the more that we can just proactively make better decisions about our health, like, okay, I can afford this. So I'm going to start, instead of eating not grass fed beef, I'm going to have 100% grass fed beef because
Mm,
I can afford that now. And like
yep.
starting to just slowly, and we can do a whole nother podcast on like the steps to get there. But like, cause there's so many steps, but
Yep.
it's just about doing the best you can. Because think about it too. Like, why do you want to support industries and people who are literally programming and designing their foods to get you addicted, to crave more and to eat more? Like
Literally.
you
Literally.
want to support people who have your best interest in heart. And that's why local communities is so important, because when you are supporting local communities, you're supporting people who actually care about you because they're in the same environment that you live in. So it creates this ecosystem where everyone actually cares, and we've outsourced everything. And that's why you have corporations that they don't know you, they never talk to you, so they don't care. Like it creates this lack of emotional connection to people, which creates more corruption and more evil decisions basically. So like when we describe the town, like we describe how God intended us to live and eat and all these different things, like that all becomes simple. You're all tending to the same animals, so you want to treat them the best that you possibly can. You're tending to the same land, the same fruit, the same, all of it. So you want to make sure everything's great, and also you want to make sure everyone has enough and that it's all thriving, because everything in the local community affects you. And this is how we lived for thousands of years, and this is how God intended us to live and eat in that way. So
Absolutely, absolutely. That's very well said. And going on the topic of complexity, like I agree, we've made food so complex when it should be so simple. And like you said, that's what we're gonna do with Generation Revival. We're gonna make health easy, normal, make it simple to where you don't even have to think twice. You're just eating in your local community, and that's gonna be healthy, nourishing foods. And so, super excited for that. And when I think about complexity, a lot of things, or one thing that came to my mind was questions that you and I both get asked a lot. And this is about supplements.
yeah,
So,
wow.
because this is something that can be convenient, it can be easier. So things like protein powder, creatine, like what are your thoughts on those? Like, do you think people should take protein powder, creatine under certain circumstances, or never, or always, or like what's your kind of take
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, so supplements, honestly, it's such an interesting topic, and obviously, I know it's so popular nowadays, and it seems like everyone is on a supplement, and I probably have more controversial takes, but the same way, like everything becomes obvious, right? Like in the same thing, like with a lot of supplements, there takes a lot of levels of processing in order to create a supplement, right? And I think obviously when it comes to a supplement, the way it's literally described, what a supplement is basically supplementing for something that you're missing.
Mm.
So I think if you're missing anything, you should try to discover that in nature first. That's always going to be what's better. And I think we've gotten into a society where people look for, if they see they're deficient in something, which whoever decides that they're deficient in something, and if they're deficient, the first idea is like, oh, what pill should I take? Which supplement should I take? Where really it should be like, okay, what food has what I'm deficient in? And I'm going to start eating more of that food or doing more of that thing, whether it be going out in the sun, more grounding,
Yeah.
eating like certain foods, whatever it is. Like that should be the first step that you're looking for before you ever take a supplement or anything of that nature. So I think that's number one.
Yeah.
I also think that even if honestly, that solves it in that way. Like you always can find the answer in nature. And I think that's always going to be true. But say for some reason you didn't want to or couldn't find it,
Or
right?
say someone is in a spot where they're in another country, or they're in like a state up north and it's like winter, and they're worried about like vitamin D or something like that. Like, should they take a vitamin D3 pill, or like should they?
Yeah, like this is what I don't agree. Like I don't think you should, and this is why, because I think we've lived in these environments and our bodies are incredibly adaptive. And I think God, like I say, God would not have put us here on this earth that in order to be at optimal health in the winter, you had to take a vitamin D pill.
Mm,
Like I just don't believe that. I think our bodies adapt. I think we are very adaptable, and God designed us in a beautiful way. And when you look at nature, you see how perfect it is. We are meant to adapt in certain environments, certain locations. So I think if you're going outside and you're doing that things even in winter and prioritizing that, like I don't think you need a vitamin D supplement. I
mm.
honestly don't think in any circumstance you need a supplement ever. obviously it comes down to convenience. Like, okay, a pill is more convenient than maybe, but it's not even
Right.
that much more convenient is the thing. That's where I kind of disagree is like, it's not even that much more convenient. When you look at protein powders, when you look at all these things, the protein is so available. In 1 pound of beef, you're getting like 60 to 100 grams of protein. Like raw milk is very abundant in proteins. Like there's so many foods that are very abundant in proteins. And I think people love convenience. And it's like, dude,
Mm.
it takes me like 10 to 15 minutes to like cook and eat a pound of beef. Like I can do it so quickly and clean up too. Or like you can get raw eggs, put it in raw milk. Put it in raw milk. You have a ton of protein there. You got like over 20 grams of protein. Like it's so easy to get your protein in. Sardines. Like there's
Yeah.
so many different things. And it's so obvious to me in that way. And like it comes down to convenience, but it's not even that much more convenient. It might be slightly more convenient. So I honestly think there's no situation where you should be, if you're looking for optimal health, taking supplements is not going to give you optimal health.
Mm.
And I think what's always going to be optimal is finding everything in nature. And that's the first thing we should be prioritizing. I think we all actually can prioritize that and easily do that.
Mm. So if someone is in a situation where they feel like they're not getting enough protein in their diet, someone who's eating 80 grams of protein per day from Whole Foods, or someone who's eating 80 grams of protein from Whole Foods and then has a 20-gram protein shake as well.
Like you're saying,
what's
they can't get the beef. Like they can't.
yeah, yeah.
Like for some reason,
For some reason,
for some reason
they're traveling on the road or something. They can't get
well, I think if it's a day, I think it's fine. I think that's another thing we've hyper obsessed about
like daily.
is like daily eating. Bryce can testify. I literally have been in the bus for the past week and a half, and I didn't have a fridge, so I had no raw milk. All I was eating every day is like a pound of beef and a few cans of sardines. Like our ancestors weren't like, I have to eat this amount of calories at this time and do this. Like I think we've had such an attachment to our like physical appearance and bodies that we like, oh, if I lose a pound of muscle, like it's the end of the world. And it's like, no, like we were not meant to live in that way where we're constantly hyper fixated on like how much we're eating, when we're eating it. And I've actually noticed is that I don't even lose that much weight. I haven't been eating a lot. I don't eat a crazy amount. I have like raw milk and then I'll have a pound of beef a day, some sardines, but like I'm not eating what most people would say is like a calorie surplus. And you've witnessed like there have been times where I should be way skinnier than what I am right now. Like if there's been I had multiple days last week where I didn't eat anything at all because of my bus situation. That wasn't like me intentionally doing that, but like, and it hasn't really like affected my physique really at all, or like my weight. I don't even think, and I don't view this go on the scale or do anything of that nature, but I can feel it. I can notice it, like my body. And this didn't always used to be that way. I didn't always used to be like that way. But once I started to allow myself to like not eat sometimes and just listen to my body, if I'm not hungry, I'm not gonna eat. Like, and only do this obviously if you're really in touch with your body, you're good mentally. But like I noticed that like that I haven't had to do that. And so in those situations, like no, I think it's okay to not get your protein intake for the day. Or whatever, whoever decided you need that amount of protein and how they figured out that there's this amount, which is a whole other conversation. But like, I think it's okay. I think your ancestors sometimes were trapped, like where our bodies are meant to be able to not eat in a day or 3 days. Like we're very adaptable. We're meant to be able to do that and still stay strong, still stay healthy. And actually, if not healthier in some cases.
Yeah. No, 100%. 100%. I think that you made a lot of great points there. And I think the truth is, in our world today, we instantly try to outsource everything. We instantly try to, hey, if I think I'm deficient in this or whatever, I just instantly, what pill can I take? What supplement? What can I do here? When instead we should be trying to get back to nature and just finding all the sources, because the sources that God gave us for all these nutrients, all these vitamins and stuff, is always going to be best absorbed in nature. And so
always
for vitamin D, you're going to absorb and utilize the vitamin D from going outside and getting sunlight more than you will from taking a vitamin D3 supplement. That's just a fact. And even things like certain like B vitamins and stuff, like eating a steak or eating red meat is going to be way more bioavailable and give your body more nutrients than taking a B12 supplement. Like it's just naturally, the things that are naturally occurring in nature and that God gave us is always going to be what's best. And we need to get back to trying to solve and like fill these gaps, quote unquote, with real food and what God gave us instead of just synthetic supplements.
And that's one of the deeper issues with supplements is it's almost like trying to play the role of God in a lot of way, in the sense of like you described, like we're trying to basically say that what we create is better than what God gave us. That this vitamin D supplement pill that we've created somehow in a lab is actually better than the sun. Is better, like the protein powders we create is better. And obviously not everyone that sells these things says that, but there will be a lot of studies that will say that it does do that it is the same and it's digested the same, which is just so not true. Like it's just logically not true. Our bodies are so complex that we can't even measure all of that. We can't even measure how much we're digesting and not. Like, it's so, our bodies are so complex, and God, clearly what he gave us is always going to be what's best for us.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's a good spot to close off. I think we touched on a lot of important topics here. We got into supplements, we got into raw versus cooked food, we got into what foods are most abundant and why, and just pasteurization, raw milk, raw dairy, all this stuff. And so I think it's a great point to end.
Yeah, and obviously I just want to emphasize, as we did throughout the podcast, but like, this is not to be stressed about. What we just talked about here is like the most what we are just discussing, like what is genuinely most optimal. Everything else, there's so many steps, so many layers to get through, especially because of how complex our society has made it. But we're kind of here, and I hope you guys from this podcast can understand it's actually not as complicated as it may seem. And once you just go back to the roots of how God intended us to live and just evaluate nature, the more that you connect back to nature, the more that you can evaluate nature and trust it and realize how perfect it was, and also just understand, like, everything becomes more clear. So no stress. No one should be stressing about any of this. Just do the best with what you have. But I hope that from this episode, you guys kind of have a more clear idea, at least, of like where we stand on things. And happy to see disagreements in the comments, as always.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Let us know what you guys think, and again, Paul and I, yeah, it's just doing the best you can with what you have and where you are at that point in time. There's steps to everything and levels to it, so I think it's important to reiterate. And eating single ingredient whole foods for a lot of people is just going to be one of like the best steps anyone can take, and like trying to remove ultra processed foods as much as possible. It's going to benefit everyone's health.
Yeah. And if you get anything from the podcast, it's honestly that. Like,
Yeah.
just prioritize whole foods. Obviously, that's what God intended us to do.
Right.
Local farms will make it simple too, which obviously I know not everyone can do, but that's definitely ideal.
Yep.
But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Let's save our generation together. Let's go.